Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. There are zero spoilers for Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves in this content. And what I want to talk today about is Hasbro's Dungeons & Dragons. So I got into a dust-up recently on Twitter with Newbie DM. He's a brilliant content creator that has some really good ideas about D&D. But he got it wrong recently, and we had a spicy conversation on Twitter, which you can take a look at if you want. And he was like, "Oh, hey, which Hasbro's D&D? Why didn't they put Gary Gygax's name on this film? Why didn't they put Ed Greenwood's name on this film?" And you will not find Gary Gygax's name on this film and on Hasbro's Honor Among Thieves, and you will not find Ed Greenwood's name on Dungeons & Dragons on Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. And guess what? You shouldn't. And the reason why was, first of all, Hasbro knew, right? They knew that every OSR ally possible and some of the indies would boycott the film and do every single thing possible to make it so that the movie would not succeed. They knew people were wishing upon their downfall from every direction. They also knew there were very real obstacles to getting this to work, right? You don't want Gary Gygax's name, which is currently connected to a non-stop, has never stopped accusation that D&D is coming from a colonial perspective. And guess what? Ed Greenwood was a key architect. If D&D is colonial, which I do not sign on to, then Ed Greenwood was one of the key architects to get it there, right? You know, Gary Gygax and Ed Greenwood could easily be lumped into that, right? So there are very real people who really do here's the issue. We have an issue of presentism today, right? Any person, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was not woke enough 2 years after she died. And people were coming back and going, "Oh, she said some really conservative things and we don't really like that." If you are in the grave for 5 years, you're done. Somebody's going to say, "Oh, something you said or something you did is offensive," right? And the reality is, that's the issue. Is you get to this point where where anybody who goes 6 feet in the dirt, they've been gone for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and every year that passes, something you said in the past is going to be considered offensive by today's present criteria, right? Now, and this is nonstop. It's not just Dungeons & Dragons, right? So the reality is, Hasbro was very correct, right, to take the slings and arrows and say, if you got a problem with D&D, you got a problem with Hasbro. Take it up with us, right? We'll deal with all the problems that this movie has. And the reality is, they wanted to disconnect all the frou-for-all that's still going on with the Gygax name. And boy, oh boy, there's some drama going on with the Gygax name, right? Luke Gygax, a prince, everybody loves him. Go one brother to the right, or you're going to hit some walls, right? And the reality is, they needed this movie. There was an incredible amount of investment in this film, right? And I think going forward, Marvel, Disney, Harry Potter. Do I even need to tell you the problems that are happening with that creator right now? You're just the company who owns the product. The company who owns the brand is the Guardian. Period. End of sentence. Right? So the reality is, this movie needed a chance to win. Right? And the reality is, it couldn't carry the baggage of Gary and Ed Greenwood. And this is a business decision and not a fan decision. Right? And I know every grognard's going to, whine and moan about it. But the reality is, this was the right decision. Right? And the reality is, Hasbro was 100% right. People came from left, right, and center to attack them. And this is not just a D&D problem. Right now, you can go over and take a look at the Dungeon Dude's latest video on Apocalypse World will help you be a better dungeon master. This is absolutely galling. They talk about Apocalypse World and, helping you to understand PBTA, powered by the apocalypse. Like, D. Vincent Baker did more than 1% of the work to get PBTA up and running. He made a cool rules mechanic. You know who made PBTA work and actually delivered it to the world, and why there's 100 PBTA games today? That is 2 men. Their names are Sage Latora and Adam Cobell, and I haven't forgotten. Adam Cobell hit a wall hard. That dude got canceled so fast it made his shed spin, right? And it was, I actually met Adam Cobell in person at a PAX Unplugged, and when I met him, he was a very nice guy. And the reality is, I think he got out over his skis, and he was buying into some very questionable stuff with some questionable people. You gotta pick who your allies are, and you gotta watch your behavior. And he got out over his skis, and he got into a really bad situation, right? And he got canceled, right? And but what really galled me, right, was that the Dungeon Dudes, there were two people. First of all, D. Vincent Baker, he did about 1% of the work to make PBTA a reality, right? And the reality is, Sage Latora and Adam Cobell, and frankly, Adam Cobell, right? And take a look at it, because he continued to carry forward Dungeon World years after Sage Latora had checked out, right? The reality is PBTA, the energy there was from Adam Cobell. And right now, you cannot attach his name to anything. There were people who, in my humble opinion, were literally fired just for getting his name close to another project, right? So the reality is, this is very real. Like, you want the target to, these companies want the target to be on their back, the company's back, so it can be spread, and all the resources of the company can catch the ire and the frustrations that the big man catches. I'm watching Winning Time. You have got to watch Winning Time, the rise of the Laker dynasty, if you're 18 or over. And it talked about being the big man, right? Like, on a basketball team, you just get doubled and triple teamed, and that's what's happening with D&D. This isn't a joke, right? There were articles and commentary pieces when they misspelled Kryn in one communication, KRYNN or KRYN. Literally, they have castigation, correction, and just everybody wishing upon their downfall, literally down to the last letter, right? And these OSRs and these indies get to skate, right? They get away with outrageous stuff, right? I just read the story of the new TSR, unbelievable catastrophes, owned by the OSR. They don't talk about it, and nobody writes. There are very few articles, very few commentaries on it, right? But D&D misspells a word, you're going to hear it, right? And that's my point, is it's unfair, and there needs to be more fairness. And I did meet Adam Cobell, and I think what he did was terrible. I think he made a bad action. But I also think, I feel really bad for Sage Latora. Like, he worked really hard on Dungeon World, and that made PBTA a reality. I can tell you right now, Apocalypse World didn't, right? And certainly not the work of D. Vincent Baker, right? And it was really galling to watch the Dungeon Dudes just not even just leave Sage Latora out, and not even mention his name for all the work he did. But I'm telling you, connecting creators to brands today is increasingly difficult, especially when they're in the grave. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. I would love to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.